Well, hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. This is David Bianco. Recently I was at the Southwest Audio Fest here in Dallas, Texas, first time ever, and I met up with Charles Kirmuss, who's a gentleman who has an interesting backstory of how he got into music and what he's involved with and how it then morphed into his record restoration process that he has on the market today. That's coming up next on the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. So if you followed my channel very much over time, you realize that I'm really into processes. I've been involved in manufacturing for over 45 years now, and process integrity is really an important part of achieving a planned outcome that gives you the right results. Well, when it comes to things like record cleaning, there's an art to it as well. Now, I know there's a lot of opinions out there about the best things to use or not use, or the best methods to go about or not go about. So that isn't the point of this discussion. Anything is better than nothing is always the first thing I want to say about record cleaning. Now, Charles might say that's not true when it comes to certain chemicals, but I just mean generally cleaning your records is a very sound thing to do, no pun intended, and it even needs to be done to new records, maybe especially some new records, as I've seen in my experience. But as it comes along here to the Charles Kirmuss method, it's a lot more about record restoration, not just cleaning. In other words, the first question is, what's on the record when you get it? It's not just the visible things, it's the things you can't see. It's some chemicals that may be involved with the creation of the physical record. It may be chemicals that were put on used records by people that owned it before you. And so it's a mixed bag. And so for one to take a one-size-fits-all process, you really got to have a strong one. Now, that doesn't mean that all records condition warrant the same amount of focus. But at the same time, in many cases, you don't really know what you have. Now, the thing that I find unique about the process that Charles uses is there are audible comparisons done before and after, and I experienced listening to some that I believe, in my mind for sure, and spectrographically without a doubt, shows that they did have a higher decibel reading on them, and they did have more punch and less noise than they did before the restoration process. And I talked to several people who came to the booth who have had the units for years and swear by them. Notice I didn't say swear at them. They swore by the process, they swore by the machine. Now, the other part of the equation is it takes time to do it fully to the best extent or greatest extent. The time is fairly long. Now, you can take some shortcuts. You might do that in cases where you knew what was done to the record or you owned the record for a long time yourself. So there are ways to do this that invoke many of the advantages of the process without some of the extensive time and labor. But the idea here is to get to a record that is in fact clean, debris-free, and chemical-free from what it has when it starts. And that's a little bit different than just cleaning on the surface, so to speak. So let's listen to Charles and his process, his history. It's all very interesting, and you can draw your own conclusions.
Greetings.
How are you? We're here at the Southwest Audio Fest, so he's going to go through what his cleaning methodology, it's not just the cleaner, it's a methodology, right? What it does, why it works, why it's better, and as a person who's in the market, why I would want to buy one.
Okay, very good. Well, I've been building audio equipment since 1965 when I was a young kid. built my speaker enclosures, made tube amplifiers. During high school, I have a Dynaco 70 Dynakit at home still. And in the 70s, 71 to 74, I worked audio stores in Montreal on Fridays and weekends.
Okay.
So I worked at Bill Layton Audio. I inherited or got all my old equipment, all my Akai 747, my Nakamichi came from Bill. And then I also worked at Audio Shop, which was the Macintosh dealer. And I have all the Macintosh equipment still at home with the MP4 oscilloscope.
Oh, wow.
Long story short, I got into this business by accident 11 years ago when I was in the Munich high-end show. I was representing Rogers BBC speakers. That company was sold from England to a Hong Kong company. And I also represented Lawrence Audio cello speakers and so on from Taiwan. And next to me was a machine, a Nessie vacuum system, $12,000. Next to me was an audio desk machine that was $9,000 in those days. And I had a VPI 16.1 at home in the 70s. I knew nothing about what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So I said, how come all this big money? Got both equipment. The Nessie died, so I got a real good deal. The audio desk I brought home, we opened it up at the office. They do nothing. The audio desk was a bubbler that already 14 years ago I knew it wasn't an ultrasonic, and the Nessie was a vacuum. So long story short, I had a thermal vacuum chamber in my office for other stuff. So I bought 6 Hall & Oates records. We put them in the machine in 97 degrees Fahrenheit, 90% humidity. 6 months later, took the records out, saw what was growing on those records, put them back in the machine again, another 3 months, took them out, and by this time I had 5 different cleaning machines, and I was tinkering around with this. None of them did anything, so I started to study a little more. Well, I learned that none of the cleaning systems in the marketplace, whether I use them or people buy them, there's a thing called the triboelectric table of charges. And it states that a record and water, or a record with water and soap in the water, they repel. They have the same electrical charge. A record is 0.0897 kilovolts negative, and water is 0.94 kilovolts negative. They repel. So there's no way that anyone can use water. Forget about whether it's a vacuum system or an ultrasonic, doesn't matter. The law of physics say that water is being repelled by the record. So that was the first thing that I learned. It's called the triboelectric table of charges. Then I also discovered that how come new records have pops? Where did the pops come from? I don't know. And all of a sudden I play records. Why are there more pops? Well, discovered that when records are being made, so here's a stamper.
Yep.
So what happens is you have a label that falls onto the stamper. You have the biscuit that falls onto the label. Then side A's label falls onto the biscuit. And then 3 minutes later, out of the press comes a record. Well, why does it come out? Well, it's a thing called a release agent. I did not know that the Shure brothers in 1977 with their V15 Mark IV had problems, and they discovered it called a pressing oil. So here we are, we forgot all about this. So as these records pop out, they're 130 degrees at this factory here, and all the factories are dirty. So dirt and dust and dandruff lands onto the cooling record from 130 degrees down to room temperature, and the dust gets fused into the record. So now every time I play, so here's a Hall & Oates record, there's a piece of dust that's 3 to 5 microns in diameter fused into that pressing oil. So now I play that record again. Well, the needle creates 1700 or 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. So when now the needle is touching that oil again, dirt, dandruff, whatever appears onto the record. So we fuse more pops in it. That's why don't buy my system, don't buy anyone's system. If you don't have money, buy a $40 brush that we make. That's 10 microns in diameter. And you want to remove the dust off the record and then use the carbon fiber end not for cleaning. This is always to remove static,
That's right.
so you will not create more pops. That's the bare minimum. So let's get back to how do we get this pop out. So what we created is a system where we're using ultrasonics. So what is an ultrasonic? One of the things that people are talking about is they think that there are bubbles that are hitting a record. Incorrect. What happens is in an ultrasonic you have transducers, call them speakers, and you have an amplifier or a signal generator inside. We call it an ultrasonic generator. Ultrasonics are basically, if you want, a speaker and an amplifier. And we have 26 kilohertz, we have 35 kilohertz, we have 40 kilohertz, we have 120 kilohertz. All that means is what size bubble are we going to create? So if I'm trying to remove a 3 to 5 micron piece of fungus, dirt, dust, and an oil, I need to be close to the 26 kilohertz. So 26 kilohertz were for oil, circuit board cleaning. We're using 35 kilohertz because the bubble is the right size when it collapses to suck materials out of the record. We're not hitting the record, we're creating a vacuum. But how do I take advantage of it? If I put a record in here, and who cares about what I'm doing with the hand, if I put a record in my machine running at 35 kilohertz with an air resonance of 70 kilohertz to even out the cavitation, I can have this record in here for 10 years, I'll do nothing. Because the negative of the record and the negative of the water, they repel. So we apply a spray. I change the charge of the record to be opposite to that of water. And now when I put this in the machine, the bubbles rise, the water is now attracted to the record, the bubbles collapse, and I'm now sucking materials out. So what are we doing? We are sucking out materials left over from prior cleaning processes, whether it be a manual spin clean, whether it be a vacuum system, whether it be a fake ultrasonic. Most of them are all fake, they're bubblers. We now want to remove first whatever you left from a cleaning solution on the machine, of any machine. Then, as we now reapply the charge, because the charge wears off as the record turns, I recharge the record. That's when I now remove the plasticizer outgassing of the record. So if you all bought a new car, that lovely new car smell. I got a 1,000-mile Kia, Solera or whatever, Sonata. Love the smell, but the windshield had a film on there already, brand new from Avis today. Well, that's what happens in a record. Your record is outgassing, the plasticizer outgasses, and it's stuck in a sleeve for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 50 years. That's where you see scratches on the record. It's not on the plastic, it's on the film. So we remove the film. Then finally, we remove the pressing oil and we will remove that piece of dust. Now, as to people that are using fluids and whatever, you cannot use a cleaning solution, doesn't matter what type it is, to get in the groove. Why? A groove is 6 microns at the bottom, that's the RIA standard, to 35, 40, 45 up in the top. And the groove's size changes with the style of music.
Sure.
So let's take a look here. Water droplet is 100 to 110 microns. It can't get in the groove, even with brushing. So all you're doing is you're now using whatever process, and all those processes, by the way, leave water. That's why you have vacuum to suck the water off. You have air drying, where the record spins and we're throwing air onto the record. What are we doing? We're coating the record. A restored record comes out dry. We have no drying method in here. The record is virtually dry because per the triboelectric table of charges, we repel water. So we have a few droplets of water, but I remove them with an optician's cloth. I polish the record and we're done. And we do not have to do this. So new records, it takes 18 minutes in and out of the machine. So it's a total of 18, I should say. 5 minutes, 2 minute, 2 minute, 2 minute, 2 minute, 5 minute. Because the new records, 16 years or younger, do not use the same quality plastic we had 19 years ago. Records of provenance unknown, like this guy here, I apply the spray, and the spray has a colorant. You can see there's a color here. That colorant allows me to see what the ultrasonic softened the previous cycle. So what I end up doing is I'll see a rise and then a fall of this white material. It's the colorant. When you see rapid evaporation and the record is dry, that's your last cycle. So here today we've done about 5-6 records. It was an average of 3 5-minute cycles to restore the record. And once it's done, you never have to do this again. Why? We've removed the films from prior cleanings. We've removed the outgassing of the plasticizer and the pressing oil. Yes, we touch our records like this, so maybe a 2-minute spin with the spray in the machine when you deem it necessary. And that's basically what we do.
Sure. So this unit has multiple slots. Does that imply you can do more than one record at a time?
Yes, yes. What happens is here we have 2 slots for 2 LPs, so I can do 4 records concurrently, 2 LPs. 10 inches are coming back because we have, you know, Simon Cowell and America's Got Talent and all of these other programs where some young singers or groups, you know, get $1 million, but they'll only make one 10-inch. They'll never make an LP. So these are all back again at 45 RPM, high res, and then a 45.
Okay.
And the spacing is very important. Some people say, well, how come you can't use these? These are do-it-yourself systems. We've proven to the industry by using aluminum foil records in here where you do not have cavitation or you have high energy of cavitation. So I presented this to Mr. Fremer about 3 years ago, and he says, Charles, you know, this is hokey, you know, it's all bullshit. Well, okay. I then had to buy a cavitation meter to prove that there's very little or high energy cavitation in between these. So for us, we can only do 4 records at a time because we need to have the even cavitation between all the records from the bottom of the record to the dead wax area. So my test here, using our system with homemade aluminum foil records 4 or 5 years ago, was validated 2 years ago by using a cavitation meter. So this is all science that you can do yourself. And a lot of the machines out in the marketplace do nothing with the aluminum foil, 0 activity, and then proven with 0 cavitational energy. So that's basically what we do. And we guarantee you between 1.3 to 6 dB over floor, which is double over double, and upwards of 28 to 38% more frequency response. You hear it, you hear the music, and also at the show here, I'm using a spectrum analyzer. So we do an A and a B. We do a before restoration and after, and we always see the difference. And we can see now the separation visually of all the instruments. And that's it.
So obviously, I'm here to tell you it's a fairly involved process to get it done and to make sure that surface is in fact devoid of all those excess chemicals that are visually showing up with the process. But I can tell you through a record that I had brought and several that I saw and listened to, I saw a guy brought in a MoFi of Little Feet that he couldn't seem to get a certain area cleaned out and sounding right. He was amazed at what ended up happening through the process that was done, and very satisfied that, you know, it finally was able to be resolved and listenable. So, you know, sometimes you just see it happening right before your eyes or before your ears, I guess, in this case. And so that much detail and attention, of course, if it can be cleaned, I guess that process is going to get you there. Obviously, the time involved and the effort involved is always going to be one of the negatives, I guess, so to speak, because we're all trying to get these clean, get these on the turntable and listen to them. And I guess I would reserve the process for ones that I really felt that needed more attention, and would kind of vary and calibrate my process based on what I thought was the condition and how much resolution was needed, no pun intended. But there's no doubt that there are sonic advantages to giving the care to the record, and also the fact that there are some films and things on the surface that are taking away from the needle's ability to truly get in the groove fully and to trace it without any restrictiveness. And so it's there. It's one for you to consider. Again, it's a very elaborate process, but I think there is sound engineering in some of the logic that's there and in some of what is seen and heard. And I guess that's where we're really trying to get to at the end of the day. We're trying to protect our needle. We're trying to get that styli to last as long as it can. We're trying to get rid of things that we don't want to hear so we can focus on the things we do want to hear. So again, I wouldn't necessarily use this across the board, but I definitely have places where I think it would be applicable, and there are some records that I would just start with. And again, I brought one there and was pleasantly surprised with the outcome. So it is possible to do. One has to make the call. Now, these machines are about $1,000 a piece. And again, you can do a couple of records in series together, 12-inch. They also have a slot for 10-inch and 7-inch, but the two 12-inches would be probably the thing most people are doing with that. And you know, you can get some production line, so to speak, going. But again, you know, your process could be, 15 to 25 minutes, depending on how many swipes you had to take at it, based on whether or not you were seeing that there was any residue still left on the record that needed to be further cleaned. So there it is. It's up to one of us in terms of our own use to decide where we want to go and what we want to do. And I'm sure we're all satisfied to some degree with the processes we have. But in fact, a lot of times these particular situations are not in fact doing a lot to our records, even though we think they are through the ultrasonic process. And I think that's something that we have to reconsider in terms of it. Some of the things that are being used are in fact, made for jewelry and other things, and maybe the sonics and hypersonics of it, that bubble size fitting in the groove. These are all relevant engineering pieces to be working through so that it makes common sense for how, in fact, that groove will get cleaned out. So, thanks for watching me today. This is one that I think is food for thought, so to speak. If you haven't subscribed, please do so by clicking on the bell below, and a thumbs up or like is appreciated, as are your comments. What's your cleaning method? What do you think of this one? I know it's a bit involved. Let me know what you think in the comments. So for now, as always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time on the Safe and Sound Texas Audio Excursion. Take care, everybody.